This is Fireside Leadership, where we explore leadership lessons that lead to personal and professional success. Here are your hosts, Janice Lee, Lisa McGale, and Leanne Nugent.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 3 of Fireside Leadership. I'm one of your hosts, Lisa McGale, and to my left is
Janice, Leanne.
Today, we're going to talk about what to do with all the stuff we've been talking about in episodes 1 and 2. So with the information that you've collected and your confidence ready to go, we're going to talk about bringing it to market. Janice, why don't you get started with how you do, because you're technically in growth.
Okay, so how do I bring it to market? So when we talk about how do I communicate to other folks if I'm looking for a job or if I'm thinking about getting into a new space, I tend to be I will be direct. If I know that I'm on a mission to figure something out, I will, and this is something that I've actually done in the past, which is I was working in a career for probably over 10 years in a specific industry, and I was really toying with the idea of moving into something completely different. Unfortunately, I didn't really know anybody in the new industry that I was looking to get into. So how I approached it was I went through my LinkedIn network, which most of us have around these days, looked at, who are some people that are kind of in the space that I'm in or have done it before. I just reached out to them quite directly and just a message saying, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm looking for space. I'm looking for some ideas or trying to find out more about this industry. I just don't really have any experience. Would you be open to having a conversation with me about it? And these are people that I hadn't talked to, some of them in like 10 years. I just really didn't really know them anymore. And, LinkedIn is really good for that. You have people, it's like Facebook, but, you're just tracking people's career progressions. And so I knew who I wanted to speak to. And I don't want to say to my surprise, because I generally believe that most people are out there to give and serve others. They all said, yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to jump on a call with you and just talk to you about it. And that's kind of how my discussions happened.
Awesome. So you took your statement with intention and just reached out to...
Exactly. I mean, even at that time, I didn't even really have a statement. It was more questions around this industry. And I think this is what I wanted to. However, for people who have their statement ready or their theme, it's even better because they can get a lot quicker and find out more targeted who they want to speak to.
Right. The clarity component.
The clarity is really, really important. Yeah. So
exactly. And I think that's the bottom line, right? You may not go out there with your brand statement in hand, but you are going out there with a hypothesis or an idea or something that you want to explore. And as long as you're clear that that's what I'm doing, people are willing to help. And there's a woman who I worked with before. Her name is Karen Mangia, and she taught us about how to make an ask. And she was just, very clear. This is what I'm asking you to do. And you can just come up with something simple. Do you recommend anyone for me to reach out to? Or you can get bold and say, do you see a role in your organization for somebody like me, right? Or do you have any advice for me, on what I should explore or look for? Or even what book are you reading right now?
Right.
It could be very, very simple. But when you make an ask to somebody, you start building a relationship with somebody, and then they start becoming invested in your growth. And then they'll want to say, okay, well, keep me posted, and then you can keep coming back. You can even ask, I've heard people ask, is there anything that I can do for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's very refreshing.
It is. I think for me in a different way, because it wasn't necessarily career development per se, it was business development. Early on when I started eLiaise, I would call 10 people a day. And it was just to have a conversation. I would have the opportunity to ask, do you have a minute? Can I tell you what I'm up to?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would ask what they were into. And it was very reciprocal, this win-win concept. And I mean, that's how we started.
Mm-hmm.
It was people found out about us and then it became referral-based. Not necessarily having a personal brand statement, however, on behalf of the company. And that's what we were doing. We were just spreading the word. And here we are 20 years later, and that's sort of like my 90-day goal is to do that again in a more broader sense, to reach out to 10 new people, because I think, one, it keeps you humble, right? It keeps you fresh. And now I am open to having a personal brand statement as well as whatever brand it is. And I think that synergy is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No.
I was going to ask, aside from tools and techniques, other resources that you guys have used in order to, what are you doing with your personal brand statements or your mission statements on a personal front to grow whatever it is that you're doing right now? Because do they line up, or are they different? Do you modify them?
That's the lining up part that
Yeah.
I'm adjusting all the time. I think it's I have ambitions, I have aspirations, but not at the expense of my family, not at the expense of my health, right? So the constant checking in that I'm doing this, it's in alignment with who I really am, what I really want to do, coming from choice, coming from,
Right.
all of these things. If the actions that I'm taking every day line up to that, and I'm seeing that I'm still able to connect with my family every day, I'm seeing that I'm able to take the self-care that I need on a regular basis, that's what I'm constantly checking in with.
Okay. That's pretty helpful. Again, that sustainable growth that you talk about a lot.
Yeah.
For me, I wouldn't say as proactively checked in as much with my theme. So the statement that I mentioned in an earlier episode. However, what I do notice now is like I constantly check in against like the things that I'm doing, and does it line up with those themes? So I was reading a book called The Essentialist. Have you read that book?
Love
The
that.
Essentialist, and I was like, oh, this is so good, and it talks about how can you be more productive, and it's actually taking away from things versus like continuing to add on your plate. And so now I frame up the things that I do versus, okay, what is it that I'm doing on a day to day? Does it still line up with the things that I want to pursue, or the vision that I see for myself, or just where I know I want to go in the general direction? So that's how I've been using it to date.
So in the theme of networking though,
Yeah.
and using this personal brand statement, how do you do those two things and still grow? Because if you're taking things away and you're being very mindful as opposed to
Right.
protective of your personal time, when you go out into the world and you say your statement, again, you had a paragraph and then you nailed it down, you've got a very succinct statement.
Okay.
How are you taking that out into market now,
Yeah.
keeping your personal stuff intact?
That's interesting.
I would say if I'm seeking out networking opportunities, because there's so many. I mean, I think now that people are open to meeting in person again, it's almost like there are too many choices, like too many events you can go to, or too many conferences or seminars you can listen into. So being selective, I guess, about the things where I engage, and also the groups of people that I want to speak to. Like, are they kind of like-minded, or I'm looking for spaces where there's similar vibes of people, if that makes sense. Yeah, I would say like that's primarily where I'm, in terms of networking, where I'm going.
That's a good one. I really like that. And then I love that you followed that after Essentialist, because I've been trying to stay, what is the one thing that I
The
can
one
be
thing,
doing?
that's another one.
And it's just, I gotta be very careful what I say yes to, because I will just say yes to everything. Because there are so many things, it's just that will contribute to my growth and development and strengthening what my brand is. But if I take on too much, it's too much. But one thing I will say is I always have to have certain things every year, right? Like one training program that I'm working on. And it ends up being two. So I'm always, right, the Essentialist thing, I do what I can, but there's, so this year I'm studying transformative leadership in disruptive times. One thing that I love about this studying is that it helps with everything else that I'm working on.
Right.
I can draw on those materials, and all of the tasks that I'm working on take me half of the time because I have a different frame of reference to draw from. So it's interesting that you say about time that, okay, so this course is requiring me to spend equivalent of 8 hours in a week. Okay, that's kind of a lot of time to invest in something, anything, right? So, okay, yes, I am doing that on the weekend. So my Sundays, right? My Sundays are gone.
Right.
So am I still taking my baths? Am I doing my masks? Yeah, I can do that because it's an online class, and it will facilitate this. So and I can listen to it, and got my mask on, nobody needs to see me. So I can multitask in that sense. But the time that I'm saving during the week and the quality of work that I'm producing now in that shorter period of time, totally worth those 8 hours,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
So then the other one is this coaching program that I'm learning. So I'm going to become a certified coach to help upcoming leaders become leaders. Super cool. How is that going to fit in? I don't know yet. But what I visioned for myself was if I'm talking to executives and leaders all day, better know how to coach them through this transformation, because transformation is really tough to do,
Right.
Yeah.
right? You need to have that growth mindset,
Yep.
and a lot of them don't. A lot of them just want to take what they were doing today and apply it to exactly what I have today, do it in this new system. Why? Do you really love what you're doing today? No, people complain about it all the time. Are you using everything that you're using? No, we don't use it, maybe like 80% of it. But you want to build it again? Why? So these kind of questions that you have to ask, well, there's a lot of emotional attachment to the previous way of doing things.
Right.
So I think that this will help in the facilitation of those kind of workshops where maybe they can start adopting some of the practices that we're discussing here.
Right.
Right? So now I'll have a formal way of communicating the message in a structured way that actually can be measured. I think that I'll be far more impactful. So I think as I start thinking about what am I choosing,
Yep.
is this going to deliver the greatest impact
Yep.
at scale going forward for, I guess, generations, right? Like
Right.
decades to come, hopefully. Knock on wood.
That's amazing. No, that's really good. Any comments there?
No, I just picked up on something that Leanne really said, which is I think key to what we were talking about is, how do you bringing back the networking pieces around communication. I think one of the things that having a clear theme statement will afford me is like when I'm out there speaking to people, I'm clear on what I'm doing. Like people know, and I'm going out there and having those conversations. One of the things that I found I've put into practice more now is that intentionally reaching out and communicating, not just when I need something, but just to touch base and like allowing people to know like, hey, what's going on with you? Like those informal touch points, which I think over the years has kind of been lost. I think people are so caught up in like, oh, I can just email them or Slack them or reach out to them when I need them. We don't afford ourselves the time to actually communicate one in person, but also just on a less formal way. We do have the formal ask when we want
Right.
something.
Yeah.
I think it's important to also communicate and have connection and network outside of those times where we're looking for something back. Like, how can I be of service to you? How can I help what's going on in your life? Because when we go to somebody with an ask, they've got like 1,000 things going on in their brain that have nothing to do with you, even though they might be in conversation with you.
Yeah.
So I think having that connection point and networking at that level will help them realize like, oh, Lisa just reached out to me for no other reason than just to see how am I doing. And actually you are amazing at that. I would say, Lisa, like I didn't, when we first met, you were telling me how many people you speak to and connect with all the time. I'm like, I can't keep up with like how many conversations with people you're having. So you tell me, how has networking changed for you over the last, I guess, few years, or now being more clear on what you're doing?
I'm chuckling here because I don't look at myself as a networker. I think
Yeah.
I think
Do you
I'm
even?
classified as social.
Yeah, you're definitely social.
I'm definitely
And I guess
social.
that's the thing, right? Like people don't think that they're networking,
Right.
but they really are.
Yes.
But all they're doing is just interacting.
Right.
And that's an interesting point.
Right.
Yeah.
So my approach again has been slightly different. I really want to know what people are up to.
Yes.
And when I'm sitting down working specifically for business development, I know I have 3 points that I want to hit. However, when I'm out there, I do kind of have a good recall of what people are into, what they're involved in, who their families are. Like that's, again, relationships is my highest value. Like,
Right.
so I have lived it like that. So thank you
Right.
for acknowledging. I genuinely love it. Like seeing people succeed is something like if I can ask them one question that is going to get you over, or if I can hold enough space for just to give you peace of mind to open your brain for you to get the answer that you need because I'm not skilled in that area. then I feel like I've contributed in my own way. And I think because that is how I have operated, like from a sincere or authentic or wise space, it's been a referral based business for me. Like everything
Right.
is, or I'll get the phone call like you, hey, a mama bear, hey, it's time for you to come and step in. Like these are two examples of what that looks like, and we have fun, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess my jam is really building awesome communities while creating wonderful memories. Like if I was going to
Yeah,
say
I
something,
know.
that's actually on my profile. So that's kind of my thing, whether it's personal development on a volunteer basis or it's
It just
really
shows up.
understanding like people's strengths. Like, hey,
Yes.
you asked the right question with Christina today, who thank you for doing all of our makeup. Right? And then like May, really just knowing what strengths of people are. And when
Yeah.
you know what that is, you're able to create really great things.
Yeah. That's huge, I think. And when you are moving through your career and moving into a leadership role, the one thing that I've heard constantly from my mentors and leaders are it's the people first, process second.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
Right?
Yes.
So if you don't know who your people are, so it's the same thing with yourself. If you don't know what makes you tick, if you don't know what makes your people tick. So meeting with somebody new every day, right? So now I've got, for some reason, even though I'm doing all this stuff, I've made it a point to have one-on-ones with somebody every single day,
That's
Oh, that's
awesome.
amazing.
That's
right?
really, really
So
great.
one thing is, and then I have something interesting to say because I'm doing this course, or I'm meeting somebody through the course, or like, I never know who I'm gonna meet,
Yeah,
And
and how
I'm-
you're going to connect.
how I'm gonna connect, and sometimes I'm not the one reaching out. People wanna talk to me. They're like, cool, a new friend. I got 30 minutes, find some time, go. Right? And then
Right.
we just meet. So fortunately, I don't have to proactively go out. Like you say, like your brand, the referral, somebody will say, hey, have you ever met with Leanne Nugent?
Right.
You may want to talk to her about that.
Right.
Very cool.
Or in my case, it's somebody expresses a problem and they'll be like, call her. And then I don't even know what it is. And then I'll adopt my networking style, which is just like, okay, what's up?
Yeah,
And it's
this is-
very low key, casual, yet I'm totally open to hearing what it is. And then it's solution driven. I think you were going to say something.
No, you just brought up something cool. 2 points. One where you say you scheduled networking time specifically, which I think is a great option for people who, even for myself, like my calendar, like if somebody reaches out and needs help, then I'll jump in and help them, and then I forget to do anything that I was planning to do. So
Yeah.
setting aside even like half an hour every week to say, I'm just going to reach out to one person in my community or network, whether it's a friend or someone you don't know,
Yeah.
just to have that touch base, I think is cool. And then in what you said, Lisa, around like, people say, like, there's a problem, call her, or, Leanne is the awesome PO person that people want to talk to, is like, what do you want to be known for? Like, if you establish, when you start building connections with people, they're end up being your personal brand ambassadors, because they can speak to, I've met her, I've had a personal one-on-one interaction with her, this is what she's about. And having more of those touch points just increases your brand identity, or however you want to call it, like just
Yeah. And it's important when you are having these interactions, if you do have a goal. So for example, if you want to grow your brand, you want to tell people what you're about, you want to speak it, right? The more you say it, the more natural it becomes. And then it's just like, okay, I've got you on that area, right? I did want to say though, because not everyone is going to kumbaya and get along.
Okay.
We've talked about, harmony and discord.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you've done when you have been in a networking event and you're talking to somebody and either your energies don't match or your vibes don't match, or you find yourself in an engagement that is no longer cohesive or harmonious?
Yeah.
What are some of the things? Because that happens.
it happens, and you need a polite way to, how do you exit the conversation and
Grace,
still with grace. And I think it's always, be professional, like be courteous, be like, how would you want to be treated on the other side of the conversation? Usually if I know that, things aren't working, like I'm not sensing there's a good connection there, and for whatever reason it is, I would like, it's been really great to meet you. Sometimes I say, if it's a lot of people in the room, I'll say like, it's great to meet you. I'm only here for X amount of time, but I really want to get to know some other people, but, shake their hand and, it's been a pleasure. And then just kind of move on to a different conversation.
Yeah. Right. So that's really good in a social setting for sure. If you're in that scenario, you want some graceful exit. One of the things that I've bumped into before too is in a business scenario where you're already engaged. What do you do when you start working together? It started off real well, but then when you see them actually operate, you question the way that they run their business and the way that they're ethically running their business. Having a conversation around that, I think would be very interesting too, right? So saying, I might not be able to do business with you anymore. That's an interesting scenario, I think. And how do you deal with that?
Have you dealt with it?
I've dealt with it once.
And what was your lead in?
It didn't go very well. I suggested to them something and they disagreed, like a way to correct the way that they were behaving, if you will. And I think part of it too was just the way that I delivered the message. And there's a lot of learning around communication that I've learned since then. And so it didn't go well. And we did have to sever the relationship. We did just call it like terminate the contract as it is right now. And we just figured out what the exit strategy would be. And it was all very amicable because we just knew it wasn't working.
Right.
And it's like a breakup is what it felt like, right? And so, or like quitting a job on amicable terms. And recently spoke to that person, and it's not personal. It's just the way that you run your shop doesn't align with the way that I would run your shop, and we need to part ways. And then, of course, the conversation was around how I would run it. So, it's not about I'm right, you're wrong. It's about my approach has a place, their approach has a place, and just coming together. And I think it's just that openness and, curiosity around, is it them? Is it me? What is this? Right? Because there's a possible chance that there's something about that person that it's not jiving with me because it's something I don't like within myself. So it could be something within. So I get into curiosity and I start thinking about what is this about? What is this saying about me? Is this really a struggle point? And I just move into curiosity. But then if the relationship has to be severed, you got to do it.
Yeah. So just being really straightforward about it.
Yeah.
So I ran into something slightly different. So not new, not somebody I was in a relationship with. This was a social engagement, and we were not jiving. This person was consuming a lot of alcohol in a very short period of time. The language is not jiving with me. And also just moral compass. There was a lot of, all of a sudden I'm hearing things about people at the table that I really have no business knowing. And I then heard her say something about us working together and spending more time together. And I was just like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
And that was my first initial reaction, right? So again, getting curious, it might be alcohol. The language for me really hard lined up, we'll see. It was a way for me to remain net neutral, still clean, still work through whatever I need to work through with my, I'm going to air quotes judgments. However, for me, it was just not a good fit.
Yeah.
And not a good fit based on the things that I already learned that we covered in episode 1 and 2, your values, your themes. And if the personal statement, if I'm building an awesome community, creating wonderful memories, this is not part of it. The language is off and you're gossiping about other people and talking behind their back.
Yeah.
So not for me.
Yeah.
We will see though in the future if that changes, because we're always, leaving room for people to transform, right? And even for me, like, what do I need to learn? Maybe I'm not supposed to be in those spaces because it's not part of my mission.
Yeah. But we are going to be in those situations, right?
Yeah.
So, we talk about social media and how we protect ourselves from it and these negative people. Like, you will be out there talking to people who don't jive with you. And so, building the confidence, the way that we structured this series was important because you have to build your confidence. You have to know who you are and you have to know where your line is being crossed and then how to gracefully exit. So,
well, the goal really here is for development, right? And sometimes part of development is exiting,
yes.
right? So, I think we've covered a lot in a very short period of time about networking, air quotes, or being out in market. And thank you for the gift of my own really getting clear. It was always there. Now we just know what to call it.
Yeah. That was great.
Okay, so
I guess wrapping up,
Yeah.
where we've talked about knowing our values. We talked about doing the self-assessments. We've synthesized it into our themes and our branding statement. We've talked about getting out there. Now it's a matter of bridging the gap of where I am today versus where I want to be tomorrow. So I think that's going to be where we go next.
Our next step.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this was speaking to you in any way, shape, or form, please do like, comment, or subscribe. In the meantime, that's all for now.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Fireside Leadership. Until next time.